Well, today, as we heard in Cleveland, more of the president's sales pitch on infrastructure there. The ball is now back in the White House's court on the major infrastructure plan out there. Republicans today said over that $928 billion counteroffer. Once again, part of this enormous budget that the president is proposing and his ambitious economic plan. So joining us now to talk about all that, Bharat Ramamurthy. He's the Deputy Director of the White House National Economic Council. Bharat, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this counteroffer from Republicans. I just asked my colleagues. The Republicans came to close to $1 trillion. I mean, to think of the Republican Party offering, to go on board with a near $1 trillion proposal on infrastructure would have been unheard of not long ago. I guess the president's moved the needle. Is President Biden really prepared to turn down that kind of spending rather than take the deal that's on the table or something close to it?
Well, the president appreciates the offer that came in today. We're still taking a careful look at it. I think that there are some positive steps that they've taken. They've come up on the amount of money that they're willing to dedicate to fixing our roads and bridges. They've come up a little bit on money dedicated to rail in this country. But unfortunately, there are still some areas where the president believes we need to invest in infrastructure, and the Republican proposal does not do that. So let me just give you one example of that. There are 400,000 child care centers and K-12 schools in the United States that still get water through lead pipes. The president's plan would rip out and replace every single one of those lead pipes, which will protect the health and safety of our children. Unfortunately, the Republican counterproposal does not offer anything in that area. Another example is that the president proposed that we renovate and upgrade veterans hospitals. The average veterans hospital in the United States is almost 50 years old, and the Republican counterproposal does not provide any funding in that area. So look, we're making some progress. We are glad to see that they have come up in certain areas, but there's still a ways of difference between what the president has said is necessary and what Republicans are proposing.
Fair enough. You know what's reassuring about listening to you is that sounds like a pretty traditional congressional executive discussion over priorities and spending on it. That's something that we've heard for decades until pretty recently. And it does sound like talks are continuing. I do want to ask you about another issue, and that's the money that's already going to states. I know that you've seen the writing, the articles on this, an analysis by the Tax Foundation found that most states right now, they weathered the pandemic far better than expected. State revenue in 2020 fell by just 1%. Just $11 billion. Well, local revenue actually rose by 6%, or $44 billion. But in the relief bill that just passed 2 months ago, an additional $350 billion going to states. Now, given that, do you think that was a miscalculation, and is there a way to repurpose some of the money? I know that there are legal issues, but do you know what I mean? Is there a way to get to the deal on infrastructure by redoing the deal on states?
Look, we think that the money that went to state and local governments was necessary for them to respond to the pandemic and to build out for the future. So, for example, one of the allowable uses of the money that's going out is for states to address gaps in broadband availability. We saw in the pandemic that lack of access to high-speed, reliable internet means that you can't fully participate in the economy. You can't fully participate in schooling in many cases. You can't get access to telemedicine. This is not optional anymore. It is required to have that kind of access. There are millions of Americans who don't have it. One of the things that the state and local governments can do, which is responsive to the pandemic and good for future growth, is to dedicate some money to broadband internet. So, look, different states are going to be in different financial conditions. We calibrated the amount of money that states got based on the need that they had. And I think that the money is going to be put to good use, re-employing Americans and making investments in the kind of growth that is necessary for the future.
Got it. So that's a no. So today, President Biden, we just heard making the case that his economic plan is working. He pointed to 500,000 jobs being created a month on average. But we saw in last month's job report, we saw that lower job growth than a lot of people expected. So what do you think we'll be talking about next week when we learn about the May job numbers? Do you think it's going to be a better story?
Well, look, I think that the one important detail from the president's speech today is that it's important to look at the long-term trend. So you look at the 3 months immediately before his inauguration, the economy was gaining 60,000 jobs a month on average. You look at the 3 months since his inauguration that we have data for, the economy gained over 500,000 jobs on average, so basically went up tenfold. That 1.5 million jobs that were created under the president's watch is the most in the first 3 months of a presidency in American history. So part of the president's point today is that if you look at this from a long-term perspective, the economy is turning around. The American Rescue Plan that the president passed, that Democrats supported, is making a huge difference in people's lives, is helping boost economic growth. Just one more point on that. Before the president took over, we were projecting, analysts were projecting about 3 or 4% annual growth this year. Now they're projecting 6 or 7% growth, which is by far the largest and the highest number of any leading economy in the world. So the president's plan is working, but we still have more work to do to make long-term investments that position our country to grow in a sustainable way for the future and position the United States to lead internationally.
Okay, well, we'll see what those numbers say. One more. So the president's $6 trillion budget, that's about 33% higher than pre-pandemic spending. It'll go up to $8 trillion over the life of this budget, the projected life of this budget. $10 trillion in additional spending altogether. The highest debt to GDP ratio in our nation's history, higher than when we fought and won World War II. That's a lot of money. And the president acknowledges, you guys acknowledge, you aren't going to pay for it altogether. We're going to shift that debt burden down the road. How do you answer people who are really worried about that much money being spent with no plan to pay for all of it?
Well, look, respectfully, there is a plan to pay for it. The president has proposed raising taxes that the very largest corporations pay to make sure that they're paying their fair share.
But Bharat, if I may, that won't pay for all of this spending. The budget is specifically in deficit over its lifespan.
Well, look, you have to look at this from a long-term perspective. If you look at starting in year 15, the revenue that the president has proposed, the tax increases on the very wealthiest folks and the largest corporations, are going to end up reducing the deficit. And for every year thereafter, the deficit is going to grow even smaller. So what the president has proposed is a set of necessary investments that allow the economy to grow faster, that give more financial security to American families, that allow us to position the United States to outcompete China and other global competitors. And over the long run, which is the way that we should look at these budgets, would actually end up closing the deficit and reducing the debt.
All right, that long run is way out there and hard to predict sometimes. But Bharat Ramamurthy at the White House, we thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.